Hi, this is Frank Taylor with Nature at Your Door, and this is another on-the-road episode with Nature at Your Door here in the Tampa Bay area of Florida. Specifically, I'm on Honeymoon Island in a mesic flatwood forest, which I find absolutely fascinating. And I've been doing episodes for my Florida playlist, my maritime playlist, so check that out on my channel. And I am just in love with this area and all the different plants and animals that are here, and their amazing and unique adaptations that make them successful in their environment. Today's episode is going to be about the slash pine tree, and it's such an interesting tree, and it is the dominant, if not the co-dominant tree here, along with the cabbage palm on this kind of forest in this region. So stay tuned. Right here in your backyard, you never know what you're going to find. So my home base is in the Appalachian Mountains, and I know all the wildflowers and trees and a few of the fungi, and I can name most of them as I walk down a trail in the woods. I came down here, and the first time I walked the Osprey Trail here on Honeymoon Beach State Park Island, I didn't know what anything is. But now I've been slowly learning about things like Hercules Club, cabbage palm, saw palmetto, snowberry, devil's gut, and even sea grape. I've done episodes on each of these plants, so if you want to learn more about the maritime forest, the coastal mesic flatwood forests of Florida, and increase your knowledge about their biology, adaptations, and some of their historic and medicinal uses as food and for medicine, check out my Florida maritime playlists. The scientific name of slash pine is Pinus elioti. It's native to Florida and states on the southern border, just bordering the panhandle of Florida. They're a commercially important tree both today and years ago, and it's characterized by a very strong, heavy wood, and it's excellent for construction. And it's particularly strong, especially for a pine tree. It has a very high resin content, making it resistant to decay, so it's also great for railroad ties, poles, and pilings. The upper part of the tree has a very dense foliage, which is a great habitat for wildlife. They have very, very long needles. Here's a rare branch that I can reach from a slash pine. And if I tug off a bundle of needles, I can see that this one comes in threes. And while at other times, I'll find needles that come up in twos. So slash pine trees have needles that are either in 2 or 3 in a bundle. And I always think of that and compare that to my 5-needle leaf pine, a white pine, which is the only 5-needle leaf pine in my state of Virginia. But here, there's several species of pine that can have 2 or 3 needles, so we'll need to look at the bark to further distinguish, for example, slash pine from loblolly pine. Because of the amount of resin in the wood, this was a very important tree for making gum turpentine and rosin. I was curious about the name slash pine and what its origin was, and I found 3 different reasons why it's called a slash pine. One says it's from using the word for swampy, overgrown area with trees and shrubs in Florida. That was called a slash. I heard another story that it's the shape of the needles on the younger branches, on the tips of the branches, that were sort of in the shape of a slash. And the third description had to do with making slashes at the base of a tree to get it to start emitting resins to protect itself. And that was how turpentine and resins were removed from the tree for the production of those naval stores. We have since discovered that this tree is part of a fire-based balanced ecosystem. In the 1940s, Smokey the Bear promoted fire suppression at all costs, and it was believed that fires in forests were essentially bad. Later, and finally in the late 60s, we started to understand that controlled burns were necessary to keep the native ecosystem in place unaltered, not allowing burns in these southern pine, slash pine, loblolly forests in Florida and parts of the South caused the development of a more deciduous community, altering the ecosystem into something that's not really balanced with the environmental conditions. We also have learned, and we see it frequently on the news, that if you allow the amount of fuel to build up in these places where there's a normal cycle of fires, there'll be so much dead fuel from long-term fire suppression that the fire will burn so hot and kill trees that are otherwise fire resistant and have adapted to more frequent fires. In several pine forest situations with a number of different species, the cones can actually hold seeds in the cones on their branches for up to 50 years and still be viable. And it's not until there's a fire where that resin will melt in the cones that holds those seeds in, where those seeds fall out and have a chance to germinate and regenerate the forest. It's no surprise here to people that live in Tampa, because Florida is known as the lightning capital of the world, and specifically the corridor between Tampa and Orlando has the highest frequency of cloud-to-ground strikes of anywhere in North America. So it's natural and expected that these communities have been adapted to fire, and fire was a part of the natural community. It was estimated that pre-arrival of the Europeans that there were probably, on the average, 3 to 15 fires per century. Locally here on the islands, what I've learned from talking to the park rangers, that actually they try to do a patch of controlled burn every 5 or 6 years. And that's to maintain the ecological community of this mesic forest, and it also helps eliminate a lot of the invasive species that have crowded in along with some of the other native species here. These slash pines play an important role for wildlife, especially on this island as nesting habitat for great horned owls, for ospreys, and even for bald eagles. I love looking for them up in these trees, and either alive or dead, they provide great habitat. Some of these trees, of course, very resistant to decay. They can die from overexposure to sea salt in water. If the ocean floods into these areas, they're very sensitive to the actual salt water. They can resist salt spray, but salt water in their roots can be lethal to them. So alive or dead, and even dead, I think these trees are beautiful, and again, just provide such great habitat for so many species of wildlife. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Nature at Your Door on the road here in Florida, near Tampa, near Palm Harbor, on Honeymoon Beach State Park Island. This is a beautiful mesic forest, an example of the southern maritime barrier island forest at its best, with so many different plants and animals. And remember, I've got a Florida playlist and a maritime forest playlist for you to learn all the different kinds of plants that are here on the island. And remember, if you like what I do on this channel, please subscribe, give me a like, and leave me a comment. I love hearing from my viewers. And remember, I cover all things nature, from frogs, toads, snakes, turtles, the myriapoda, insects, trees, wildflowers, and fungi. I cover all the things you might encounter just outside your door. So thanks again for watching this episode of Nature at Your Door with the amazing slash pine.